If you're taking VCE English or planning to, then this video is for you. Hi, I took VCE English early in 2023 as a year 11. If you're wondering how that's even possible, then do keep watching. We're going to break down all of my SAC marks, my SAC rankings, and my exam marks that led me to get a 45 raw in the subject, even after failing to finish my exam and getting a derived score. I took English 3 and 4 early as a year 11, and I took it with some of my friends who were also offered it. Obviously, I jumped on it because I wanted it out of the way, right? Like for a lot of us, English is this thing that weighs on our minds because you know it's going to be in your top 4, so you really care that you do it well. In year 11, I obviously had more time to really dedicate to the subject, and then come year 12, I did not have to pick up a single book ever again, and I could just switch my mind from English to French. Taking English early had a huge payoff, but then again, I also had some more unlucky times in year 11 where I literally fell ill and failed to finish my final VCE English exam. SAC performance can save you in unlucky circumstances where you just bomb the exam. I'm going to show you what the marks of a rank 1 English student looks like. That will hopefully help you think about what sort of goals you're setting for yourself in terms of SACs and exams. You might be pleasantly surprised that in English exams, the bar is quite low and you do not need anywhere near perfect marks to get near perfect study scores. And I will also be talking to you a bit about my strategy to studying English and keeping up my rank 1 and succeeding in it, because English is a really gameable subject. It's not about being this literary genius or this super deep intellectual, okay? I was neither of those things, but I learned how to write the way my assessors like me to write. So yeah, the secrets of a student who took English early and was rank 1 throughout units 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I'll even talk a little bit about derived scores as a process and how you can come off with a pretty decent study score even after bombing your exam. So yeah, stay around for that, and we're going to start with opening my statement of SAC marks. You can find this in the statement of study score, which I think I ordered in December 2023 when I had to fill an HES application, or maybe I was just trying to find out whether they ended up using my exam score or derived score. So anyways, what you want to focus on is this left-hand column first. This shows the raw SAC averages that my school reported to VCA. So they said that in Unit 3, I had a SAC average of 99%, and in Unit 4, it was 100%. And then the right column shows how after I did my exam, VCA then looked at the exam score and tried to match that level of performance to my SACs. And so they ended up scaling down my Unit 3 average by 1%, and my Unit 4 average, luckily, I guess they did not touch it at all. So 100% stayed 100%, and I'm not VCA, so I can't tell you why only one unit got scaled down and the other stayed the same. But you can also see my final exam score, my raw 1, for the exam that I bombed. That was 50 out of 60, and you might be wondering, oh, like that doesn't seem so much, and how come it still says a study score of 45? And I'll get into that later, and we'll talk about what sort of exam marks will correlate to what study scores, and once again, it's pretty forgiving. I just want to point out that my SAC averages, so 99%, 100%, this is not the universal benchmark for rank 1 or a super high study score. So as I'm sure many of you know, there are schools that do not give out 100% for any English SAC. They might have the highest score in any English SAC be a 90%. It doesn't mean that if you're from this type of school, you are blocked from higher study scores above 45. It just means that you want to really clutch up in the exam so that VCA can take your super high exam marks and then boost up your raw SAC marks up to about 100% or close to it to reflect that your school was very harsh in marking. Whereas for me, I guess my school did give out 100% to the rank 1 in English, which is why my high SAC marks acted as a safety net for me when I sort of bombed my exam. So as nice as this 100% raw SACs may look on the statement of study score, that's not the super important part at the end of the day. It's being rank 1, because then you can get your SAC marks adjusted up as much as you need to hit that 100% if you clutch up in the exam. So in case you wanted something a little more detailed and insightful, I did keep a full score log for my final 3 and 4 subjects, because that helped me track as well how my SAC marks would be weighted in my final study score. I had a Notion page for all my VCE subjects. It definitely made me feel better to see this aesthetic every day when I opened up my Notion, and in English we obviously had all my pages, and I'm also going to show you my score log for 3 and 4. Highly recommend using this as a template for all subjects, because the number one mistake people can make is obsessing too much over each SAC as an individual and forgetting that what VCA gets at the end of the day is your unit average. So when you keep a table like this, it helps remind you that even if you flop one SAC, it's only contributing a small part in the end to your study score, and keeping this running total will help you see what you're sort of tracking towards. These SACs on the left should be mostly familiar to you, even if the order is a bit different. So we started with the creative response, which is where, you study a text and then you have to make your own short creative that expands on part of the story and emulates the author's style. I very much enjoyed this SAC as short story competition writing had always been one of my side hustles or second jobs, but I actually completed this SAC a month after my whole cohort did, and the reason is because I actually switched back into English 3-4 a month into 2023 because I had first been trying a few weeks of literature 1 and 2, and I quickly realized that yes, no, it's not for me, and I'd rather just be putting my effort into finishing my accelerated English and just getting English over with. So if anyone would like to debate in the comments about, the merits of literature versus English as a subject, I am all for that. Or I just want to give you hope that yes, schools can be chill like that and they can let you switch into a 3-4 subject even when a SAC has already happened. And I really benefited from joining in late because it means I missed the unit where everyone was forced to study the entire book before selecting which mini story they would base their own story on. So I didn't have to study the whole book, and ours was Bad Dreams by Tessa Hadley. And for some reason, my whole cohort had a deep-seated hate for this book after having to study all of its chapters. Whereas for me, obviously, I just read 1 or 2 chapters. I just decided, okay, I'll base my story off this one. And I didn't have to analyze the whole book like they did. So I guess I cut down my study time and I still got a 29 out of 30. And to this day, guys, I still don't really know what the deal with Bad Dreams is. So it was always really funny to me when all my friends were hating on it because it makes me feel like I dodged a bullet by sort of doing it late. By the way, if you want to know my strategies for success in this SAC and any of the others, please do leave your questions in the comments. The reason is that I'm not sure when exactly I will get out my individual videos on each type of English SAC, but I will get back to comments that are left under here. Moving on, our second SAC was the analytical response. This is also part A of your final exam, and our text was The Erratics by Vicky Laveau Harvey. That's a really good text for analytical response, if I'm being honest. It's very easy to draw on and write all these, deep sentences about. And SAC 3, the ALA, is what would be part C of your final exam. And so for both of those, I got 100%, so that brought my Unit 3 raw total to 99%. And as you can see, I got 100% for the 2 Unit 4 SACs, so it means that throughout my entire year of English SACs, I only dropped 1 mark, and that was from the creative SAC. If you've dropped more marks than that already, that's not the important part here, guys. It's that you're rank 1 or close to it. So just recall that not every school has a sort of grading system as mine does, and maybe in another school, rank 1 looks like maybe 5 marks dropped across the year. Also, the one SAC here that you definitely won't do is the comparative response, because that's what they took out of the study design and replaced with framework responses last year. And this might be the only thing that ever made me wish I took English in my normal year instead of early so that I could do the framework response instead. What comparative was like, it was like analytical, but double the work and then some, because you're analyzing, studying, and then memorizing 2 whole texts, and also the ways to compare and contrast them. Just a lot more ideas to pull together. So if anyone has questions about framework responses, that's the one thing I cannot help you with because that was not from my study design year. Just know that the study design changing was for the better for you guys. But look, maxing out these SACs was just about maxing out each column of the rubric for each SAC, and I did pour a lot of time into English because I could afford to. I was in year 11, and my only 3-4 subjects were English and legal studies. So yes, I had plenty of time to prepare my best for every SAC and spend a lot of time giving practices to my teachers who were also VCA assessors, getting their really expert feedback and constantly writing out practice SACs in the lead up to each SAC. I worked hard to memorize 100 or even over 100 quotes for each text I was studying so that whatever strange niche prompt came up, I would be ready with all sorts of ideas and sentences. But what I didn't spend lots of time on was rereading the text over and over again. So I know English teachers usually tell you to reread a text like 3 times, also reread it just before each SAC or exam. But honestly, I didn't do that because I just don't have the patience, and I found better ways to memorize without reading a text over and over again. So if you want to learn how I prepared for each SAC and for exams with regards to memorizing basically everything, then keep watching. I'm going to go through that after the exam scores, which we are going to see now. Quick recap of the scoring system. Each essay is given to 2 VCA assessors who are registered English teachers, and so they each give you a score out of 10, which is then combined into a total score out of 20. And looking at my statement of exam marks is funny because you can see the way I was dying over the exam as I was fighting my illness and medication. So we started off with section A, analytical, and we started off strong. You know, I obviously had more energy at the start, and I got through that. I got a 10 out of 10 from both VCA assessors. But then we hit section B and the fatigue was starting to get to me. And as I mentioned in my Storytime video, this was about an illness that was sort of slowing me down, but I really tried my best to power through section B. But by the time I finished and looked up, I had like barely any time left for section C. And that was the moment I realized I was kind of cooked. So you can see that for section B, the comparative, I obtained a total of 18, meaning that both VCA assessors probably gave me 9 each. So I was still like on track and okay with section B, but what I really did to let my study score slip away was how I went on section C. So that's the section I did not finish. I left it to last because that's just my order of doing things. And I had only a few minutes. I managed to squeeze out like 2 to 3 paragraphs. And I want you guys to take away from this how important it is that you hand in a finished product. Now, the reason is because the median score on all English exam sections is 7 out of 10, meaning that anyone, even if they were a high-level writer or just average-level writer, if they can hand in a finished piece, their most likely or the most common score is a 7 out of 10, meaning that when, like me, you hand in something that's clearly incomplete, a VCA marker cannot give you like 7 or above. They cannot reward you or mark you the same as they would mark someone who's managed to turn in a full product. Because when you hand in something incomplete, at that point, it's not really about the quality of it anymore. Even if your 1 to 2 paragraphs are 10 out of 10 quality, VCA cannot reward you 10 out of 10 because it's an incomplete essay and there are parts of the article and whatnot that you have not touched on and discussed. So there's a mark threshold, which is sitting at around 6. That's like the best you can get for something that's half done. And so that is why I did expect this score. Walking out, I did really wish that I had been able to finish it just because section C had always been a comfort section for me. And so I want you guys to take this and use it as motivation to not end up like me and to finish your entire exam, because you get free marks at that point just for handing in something that's complete. Like if I had just handed in a very mediocre section C, but one that was fully written, that would have been a easy 7 right there, and that could have actually changed my study score up from 45 to 46 or 47. And these small things make a big difference in the end because study scores can be quite sensitive to exam scores once you're in that upper end. Now, if you pay attention to the bottom here, I had a final score of 50 out of 60 for the English exam, and the A+ cutoff was 46 out of 60. In most years, the A+ cutoff is 46 out of 60, and this is a good thing, guys, because if anyone is looking for scores in English in the 40s, you just need to think about really hitting this A+ cutoff. And there are so many different ways and different combinations of section marks that could lead to a score above 46 out of 60. One example, you could just get 8 out of 10 on all your sections, which isn't that hard done. It's just a step above the average, which is 7 out of 10. So if you just hit 8 out of 10 on all your sections, okay, so that means a 16 out of 20 times 3, that's already 48 out of 60 total. You've already hit the A+ range, and assuming good SAC marks, like easily a 43 study score. And the thing with English exams is that at the upper end, sort of 50 and above out of 60, that's when your study score gets really sensitive to differences in exam scores. So my 50 out of 60 combined with my 100% SACs was enough to scrape a 45. But I could have also gotten a 45 by having less good SAC marks, but a slightly better exam mark. This is what actually happened to the rank 2 in my cohort. So I was hoping that they would pull through on the exam and do better than me, because this also provides me a safety net and ensures that my SACs won't get scaled down too much. So basically the rank 2 did a little better on the exam and got a 46, and I feel a little bad sometimes because I realize that they probably would have gotten even more if they hadn't sort of been blocked by me, the rank 1, flopping my exam. There's really good explanations online of the mechanism I'm talking about with how rank 1 and rank 2 can sort of affect each other. At the end of the day, exam marks start to make a big difference at the upper end. Like, if I had finished section C, if I'd performed the same way I'd done at school with a 10 out of 10, that would have been a 50 right there. And I'm not even kidding, it's just how sensitive your study score is to your English exam marks. And this is why I tried really hard to keep up my rank 1 and 100% SACs throughout the year, because I just had this feeling that something bad was going to happen at exam time and I would need a safety net, which was my high SAC marks. Anyways, here's a rough conversion table that I've made using not just my own, but years of data from VCA reports and other people's results. And if you're wondering how to get these odd numbers, that's just what happens when your two VCA assessors give you something slightly different for a section. It's removing all other variables by just assuming rank 1 and 100% SACs, so take it as just a very rough guide of what sort of exam marks lead to what sort of study score. But I've made it because I want you guys to sort of be encouraged and see how achievable it is to get these top-end study scores in English. The exam is very forgiving, as I've said. The bar is not that high. Say I had just finished my section C essay and got an A8 out of 10, which is only slightly above the average, I would have had a total of 54 out of 60. In most years, that's the cutoff for either a raw 49 or a raw 50 in English. So as you can see, it's all really achievable, and it's almost like one extra exam mark turns into one extra study score point at the top end. But how do you get to the top end and write those essays that score 9 to 10? Now that you have some idea of what exam total you might want to aim for, we'll talk about that next. I could make multiple full-length videos on this topic of actually succeeding in English, especially videos tailored to each and every SAC. So for the interest of time, I will just provide sort of a overall general strategy to approaching each assessment. I used Notion most of all for English, but you could also do it in OneNote, but I just like the drop-down feature in Notion more. To echo what I said earlier, I'm all about cutting down time and being efficient when it comes to studying, because your time is precious. So instead of rereading and rereading my text, I did it once and I did it well. It means highlighting and annotating everything. And I mean everything, so any quote and literary device, even if you are not sure whether it will be useful in an essay now, if you can see the tiniest potential for analysis and discussion, you highlight it and you annotate it. This is genuinely what all my books looked like by the end. You do not want to just highlight the character dialogues. Like, that's the worst thing you could do to yourself, because a top-end essay, I'm talking 8s, 9s, 10s, that's when you are also analyzing the literary devices, the language used by the author. You know, character dialogue quotes will only get you so far. They might get you to a 7 or an 8. What makes an assessor really happy is seeing someone who's constantly analyzing, you know, the metaphors, the symbolism, the setting, and the structure of a story. Assessors love that. But if you don't take these annotations now and make these highlights and look out for these things, then you're just limiting yourself from accessing top English scores. And always try to keep your annotations color-coded, so assign a highlight color to each theme of the text, and your teacher will always tell you in advance what are the core 5 to 7 themes of the text that your essay prompts could touch on. And this way, you're organizing your notes really well so that you can type it all up into a giant table that's sorted by theme. If you have that table, that list of quotes plus their analysis in, 2 to 3 sentences, then you don't need to return to the book, and you've just saved yourself so much future time. You've already extracted everything that could possibly be of value in the book. Over time, you're going to cut down the quotes that aren't really useful anywhere and build a more streamlined table that you really want to memorize before a SAC and the exams. For example, this was my super condensed version of my quote repository when I was preparing for the first analytical SAC. And as you can see, I tried really hard to fit it into 1 page per theme of the text. And so on the left-hand side, I had just your basic boring, dialogue quotes. Now on the right-hand side was full of literary features, and I always try to use those even more so in my essays because they just impress an assessor way more than any character dialogue could. But yeah, I memorized it all, and you'd be surprised how much easier it is to memorize things when you make your notes pretty, like I mentioned in my chemistry video as well. As I'll show you now, prepping for success in English assessments is not just memorizing the quotes and language devices you'll discuss, but I was actually memorizing entire sentences, phrases, and paragraphs. I had a big section for each theme, and it had its own color. And these are topic sentences that you can mix and match to form the 3 arguments of any essay touching any of these core topics that can show up. And some of these came from my thoughts or from things my teachers said or other people said, and then I would reword it, put everything in your own words, and write out really polished topic sentences that are tensive, that are using great vocabulary and great sentence structure. If you pre-write really quality sentences beforehand, it makes the actual writing during time pressure much easier, because often for us the hardest thing is just starting off a paragraph with a really quality topic sentence. Once you already have a bank of topic sentences in your mind, you can pull one out for the occasion and sort of continue on the paragraph from there. As you can see, I use the drop down feature in Notion a lot. So every topic sentence, you press the drop down, and under that I would write a full-on paragraph or just a rough outline of what would continue on from there, what sort of quotes would feature in that paragraph that sort of back the idea in that topic sentence. At the end of each themes section, I had this structure, setting, and ending quote drop downs. I would write down dot points for setting and structure that you could weave in anywhere in the essay that touched that theme. And this is part of my essay checklist. I can go into that in the future, but I had a checklist of things I had to include in every essay. Analysis of structure and setting was part of that. They have to feature somewhere in a paragraph because that's what sets apart a 8 or 9 essay from a level 10 essay, is that discussion of much more interesting deep language features such as how the setting and structure of the text was used to make a certain point by the author. And I also had the ending quote there because at the end of the day, your assessors are people, and I've had VCA assessors tell me that they really love when an essay ends on a sort of high or optimistic note. So I would collect ending quotes that are sort of hopeful, that relate to each theme that could show up in essay prompts, and I would just memorize all sorts of ways to end my essay in a really poetic way. And I want you guys to just set aside for a moment what your teachers say about, don't memorize, don't pre-write essays. I forgot the channel's name, but there's this one person who's gotten a raw 50 in English and basically uses a similar strategy to me, which is pre-writing your paragraphs or at least topic sentences and then memorizing everything so that you're prepared for any single prompt that could feature. The more prep work you do, the more confident you'll be during the assessment and the more polished your writing will be because it's something that you polished beforehand. Because then the only main decisions left for me in the SAC was what order would I put my arguments in, but my arguments were pre-written and stored in my mind. And obviously I did not memorize all the thousands of words I wrote. Instead, I took the topic sentences that were best written and highest quality, and then I highlighted them with the theme's color. And those were the sentences and drop downs that I would reread over and over in the days leading up to any English assessment. This is the exact same approach I had to preparing for the exam as well, because as I've mentioned before, I was super ill during exam prep season, and instead of doing full-length English exams, all 3 sections in a row, I was only able to get the strength to write a timed essay here and there, like individually, and most of my prep work was actually just rereading my Notion. Now, the one extra thing that I did for final exam prep, and what I highly, highly recommend that you do if you are shooting for a near to raw 50 in English, is this, and it's making a repository of super high level examples of writing. This is a page from my exam prep Notion section where I just combed through the past 5 years of VCA English exam reports. And these things are a goldmine because it's VCA giving you raw examples of students who received 10 out of 10, their paragraphs. It's VCA explicitly telling you, this is the kind of writing we like, this is the style of wording we like, and what we'll reward you for. You can see what I did here. I actually copied down all these high-scoring examples and I highlighted the parts that spoke to me, the parts where I thought, okay, this is actually clever writing. Like, I agree that this is clever and I want to learn how to use this kind of wording in my own work. I would assign a certain color to good ways to start a sentence or good ways to close a sentence, or just good words in general for me to use. I did pick up some new terminology by combing through these past VCA exams. And I also, especially for ALA, created these super, super helpful tables that give you all sorts of First of all, meta-language to use in your analysis, but also sentence structure stems, good ways to start the sentence, verbs to use when describing what the author does, ways to end the sentence. VCA assessors are really into a sort of, I'm not going to call it pretentious or deep, but a very erudite sort of writing, and they love a variety in sentence structure. There's certain ways of phrasing that they absolutely love, and they make it very clear to you. So go through their reports and listen to them. They're telling you what they want you to write like. And forget a moment about finding your own voice. You know, English, at the end of the day, it's a language. How did I learn English when I was first learning it as a language? Well, you learn from people who are better than you. Finding examples of people who wrote better than me or who said something really smart that I liked, and learning how I could incorporate that into my own work. It's like an art of imitation and learning to make it your own, rather than creating your own voice spontaneously. On the story of my traumatic English exam, as you can see, everything had been going well in the year up to that point. I had been keeping 100% SACs and rank 1, but then come exam season, I fell super ill. I was forcing myself every day to stare at my screen and try to study, try to memorize my quote, try to write practice essays, but I was half dying at the same time. I did not do a single full run English practice exam besides the one practice that I did at school that was mandatory. I didn't know if I could even turn up on the exam day. I started to get some severe side reactions to the medicine that I was on. I was half dying during my English exam. I tap out because the time is up, and I'm literally walk out wondering, you know, is it over for me? Is there anything I can do just to like improve my chances and do some damage control? You are allowed to get a derived score even after you've sat the exam, as long as it's within the next 48 hours. So don't worry, there are always contingencies if such a thing happens to you. I went quickly to get my paperwork filled by a medical specialist, and then I did the online application, and it caused me so much stress, guys, because the VCA's online digital portal is so outdated that like I could barely log in. I had to like ring up the special provisions team so many times because of IT issues on their end. But at last, I managed to get my application through. So, you know, once again, because I worked so hard throughout the year and gave myself such a solid grounding in terms of writing skills and SAC marks and SAC rank, I could afford to bomb my exam a little because I had that foundation and that safety net already there. But if you hadn't been trying throughout your SACs in the year and you did like, and then in exam season suddenly you fell ill and you couldn't study and you couldn't even finish your exam, then you would be cooked because you didn't have all the like background and all the good SAC marks to support you. So please do take your SACs really seriously throughout the year, because you don't know what will happen on exam day. So don't leave anything up to chance and just take every SAC as it comes and put your best effort in, because that's what I really learned from English. But yeah, sorry for the huge yap fest there. Basically, English is a subject I'm really glad to have been able to take early. Those were the marks that led me to get a 45 raw, even despite the circumstances that unfortunately happened around exam time. So once again, SACs really do matter, and this is a subject where a good score is really quite achievable just because it's like such a huge cohort and the bar is a little low. So I really hope that seeing my breakdown has maybe helped you get an idea of, you know, what sort of scores you're on track for maybe. But in any case, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next videos, and I'm hoping to make more English focused videos about every type of SAC. So thank you so much, and yeah, I'll see you next time.